Ladies, gentlemen, all those in between. Some of you I'm seeing for the first time, some of you are old friends. And I'll say this, every time I give this presentation, it changes a little bit. For any of you guys who are interested in doing presentations and trainings, one of the big tips that I would give you is to always know a minimum of 10% more than what you're going to train about. Always know a little bit more, because that way you're not confined to the notes. You go on what is supposed to come up. And it's interesting because when I do this, there's been very good information that's come up for a lot of people. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that because this is something that I'm really adamant about, something that I really like. So just a teeny bit about me, just to know first. My name is Michael Vanderplas. I go by Mike a lot. Obviously, I'm a hippie. You can look at me. I got a long hair, beard. It's trimmed down a little bit. But I'm also an ICU nurse. I've been an ICU nurse for over 17 years. I've worked in medical missions in 4 different countries, doing volunteer work with Operation Walk. They're a division of Operation Smile. Done multiple things with that, 50, 60 surgeries in 5 days, 4.5 days, with people usually running their post-anesthesial care unit for that. Guatemala, Salvador, Brazil, and some other countries, I can't remember. Anyways, done that. So I've been around the block. I've spoken at more than 20 different nursing schools, universities, on caregiver burnout, on suicide. I've been invited in July to do a small book tour in Brazil, where I've been invited already to some nursing schools and some other universities, been invited to speak at Department of Health down there, and there is a possibility in the works for me to do this presentation at Johns Hopkins, possibly in July as well. I will be on Good Things Utah between the 10 and 11 spot on the 11th of next month, and going to be on Channel 13 on the 12th, and have already been interviewed by Latino communities on 2 of their television stations. So I've got some experience with this. There you go. It's cool. Yay for me. In some of these classes that I've done, and some of these the podcasts that I've been on as well, everybody asks me. They're like, suicide, it's a great subject to be talking about. We need more conversation on this subject, which I fully agree. And people will ask me sometimes, they're like, why did you choose this? What is the purpose of you choosing this conversation? And I like to just kind of joke around a little bit, because since this is such a heavy concept, a heavy subject, I like to joke just a teeny bit and just say, well, it's because I like the easy subjects. I like the light, little, easy subjects that are just whimsical. And people are like, what? I'm like, I'm being sarcastic. I go for the rough stuff. Having worked in ICUs, having worked in ERs, having worked in psych units, specifically adolescent psych units, I've seen a lot of stuff. I don't want this to be heavy, but I've probably seen more death than all of you combined will ever see in your entire life. I've been in more life and death situations than I can count. Some people sometimes call it heroics. I call it Thursday. It's just something that comes in. And through that, I've gained a lot of this insight. It's not an easy subject. It's something that's rough. But there's a guy, sociologist, very well known, passed away years ago, Joseph Campbell. Anybody hear of Joseph Campbell? Raise your hand. Cool. Anybody hear of Carl Jung? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. We're going to be talking some about him today. So anyways, Joseph Campbell, he was probably the best sociologist that ever lived on the planet. And he has this conversation, and he has this concept called follow your bliss. Anybody hear about that? Follow your bliss, that terminology. What he means by that, he's not necessarily saying to be happy. That's not what he's saying. In fact, for me, happiness is not a good terminology for me. Whoa, that's weird. Why would I say that? I say that because a lot of times people are searching so much for happiness that they don't look and they don't notice it. They're looking so much for something that they already have that they don't even notice it. And so the follow your bliss statement by Joseph Campbell was not a follow happiness. It wasn't a search for have a good time. It was to do something of meaning in your life. It was to find a meaning, to find a reason to live, something that gives your life purpose. And whereas I make a lot more money doing the travel nursing, have some real estate, I do trainings in neuro-linguistic programming, train and certify people in that, train and certify people in hypnosis. What is important is doing something of meaning in our lives. The author Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I see a few smiles, a few head shakes. If you have not read that book, please take a second to jot that one down. Man's Search for Meaning. Beautiful book, right? Yeah. What was your name again?
Chris.
Chris? Cool. Yeah. Good one, huh, Chris? So Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl wrote that in 1947. Here's an interesting fact about it that not a lot of people know. He did not want his name anywhere at all on the book, anywhere. It was something that he wanted to put in there because he felt it was important to share with other people, but he didn't want credit going to him. But his friends convinced him to put his name in the copyright page so that somebody wouldn't steal that idea from him. Now, Viktor Frankl was a physician and a psychologist prior to going into 4 different concentration camps over 3 years. Now, to give you an understanding of how cool that is, that he was able to survive that, is before what Hitler called the final solution, which was the last 9 to 10 months of World War II, where he actually utilized resources that would have helped him win the war in order to annihilate the Jewish community. So his psych-filled craziness kept him from winning the war. Before that, the average lifespan was about 8 months in one of these concentration camps. He lived longer because he had a few different advantages to where he could get an extra day off from working. He worked in the infirmary, so they gave him extra meals. And that helped him to see and notice, and by looking at some of these different people, he would see when people would lose a meaning. So people would have some kind of vision and they'd be looking at, hey, I'm waiting for my anniversary because I think that I'm going to get out of here before my anniversary or New Year's or Christmas or something like that. Well, probably Hanukkah now, right? Sometimes I'm not super smart. So with these things, these people would sometimes believe that that's what it was going to be. Welcome. Thank you for coming. He noticed that as these days would get closer, the people would realize that they might not be liberated by someone, that what would happen is they would lose hope. Now, when they lose that hope, everything would fall, and they would suspect that when they saw that person eating the small morsel of food that they were storing or the cigarette that they had stored away, that they would pass away in the next 2 days, 48 hours. And he was right. And one of the reasons for this is because we have 3 things that are a foundation for us as humans to have a meaningful life, to have something that keeps us going, that draws us forward. And what this is it's identity, connection, and direction. And when they would lose that meaning in their life, and they'd lose that identity or that direction, it would fall. So whenever any one of those 3 things, the identity, connection, or direction, would fall, so would the foundation of their life. There's a few seats up here.
Sorry.
No. Please don't be sorry. I'm glad to have you here. Thank you so much. So, having worked in the psych hospitals, getting back to this, having worked in the psych hospitals for a few years, I worked primarily on an adolescent floor. We have some healthcare, behavioral health peeps right here. Raise your hands. beautiful peeps. There you go. Wonderful ladies doing the work. So with that, there is an assessment tool that we do on intake called the CSSRS. Okay, the Columbia Severity Suicide Scale, rating scale, something like that. I got it wrong maybe this time. There's 3 different things in there that kind of talk about how to measure somebody's likelihood of suicide. I'm like, they could have just called it the suicide scale, but they had to make it sound super official. So on this scale, there's a series of different questions. And the series of questions goes over a whole bunch of things. Oh my gosh, I get Joe in my class. I haven't seen this guy for years. So in this suicide scale, there's a whole bunch of different questions. And some of the questions are like, how often do you think about suicide? How strong are those ideas about suicide? If you wanted to get your mind out of thinking of the suicide, how difficult is it for you on a scale from 1 to 10? And there's a whole bunch of different questions like that. So one of the last questions says, why did you try to commit suicide? And that was an interesting question. But being a master practitioner and a master trainer of neurolinguistics, I realized that the wording is wrong. The wording is incorrect. Now, for any of you guys who do coaching or trainings or personal work with people, I want you to start throwing out the word why. Like, throw it away. For me, I say it in the book. There's a section in there where I say it's not a good word to use. Now, Dana, is that? Oh, I got it right. Amanda? Oh, Lynette. Boom. I'm getting it, guys. I'm getting it. So in this, in the book, I actually say it's kind of a stupid question. Because when we say why, it makes us think of reasons. Or I would say even excuses of getting out of our mind frame with it. Now, if we change that just a little bit, and instead of saying, why did you try to commit suicide? And we change it to, for what purpose did you attempt suicide? So you can utilize that with clients. For what purpose did you do this bad behavior? For what purpose did you do this good behavior? It actually changes the way that our brain thinks to where they come up with an understanding. So in coaching and training and health work, for me, it's not important for me to hear excuses, and it's not important for me to tell people things. It's important for them to get it out of them. So this helps them to get an understanding as what is the underlying value below there in the unconscious mind. You guys have a good understanding of conscious mind, unconscious mind? Yes? Good. Because that way, that cuts out a part, because I want to put some other parts into this presentation. Unconscious mind, great, runs about 4 to 6% of our daily occurrences. Unconscious mind runs majority of the habit things that we do. Like the unconscious mind is, you are not conscious at this moment until I mention it to you, the feeling of the chair on the back of your legs. Now you're conscious of it. It's that thing that's kind of running in the background. Okay, cool. So with this unconscious mind, when we change the wording around just a little bit, we can help get deep. We can help go deep into finding what the person's truly thinking instead of just this surface thing. When I would say words like, why did you commit suicide? Or why did you attempt to commit suicide? A lot of these people would say stuff like, oh, because my parents are arguing with me. Oh, because my wife left me. Oh, because I'm no good. But whereas I'd say, for what purpose did you attempt suicide? Other words would come out, like, to end the pain. I couldn't take it anymore. I just create so much pain in this world. I do everything wrong. These hurt things, these dark, dark things. And that is a rough thing to bring to some people's attention. Yet at the same time, there's an interesting concept about this. Now, Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, a guy who I kind of myself believed to be the second most intelligent person who ever lived on this planet. The first would be Friedrich Nietzsche, and that's probably because his writings are so complicated that it's hard for me to understand. And trust me, I understand a thing or two. But Carl Jung, he invented this really cool idea. One is called perception as projection. So how many of you have ever heard or said or had it said to you, oh, that person's saying that to me because they're just projecting it on me. It's really them. Any of you hear something kind of like that? Okay. That came from Jung. The guy died in 1961. Smart dude. Another thing that he came up with that was really big was called the collective unconscious. He believes that we all have a tie-in to each other. But more importantly, he also had this idea called shadow work. Do you know shadow work? Is it easy or tough? Yeah. It's not like a spiritual awakening is, yay! It's like spiritual awakening is like, oh, this is this heavy thing. It's this going through the difficulty to find out. So with these two things, we kind of utilize them in a way. When I'd ask these kids, when I'd ask these adolescents, and I do this with adults too, but I was primarily on the adolescent floor, and a lot of my coworkers would be like, "Hey, Jedi Master, go talk with the kid for a little bit." So I'd go chat with them and spend an extra half an hour with them as they'd kind of keep the fort down. We'd go deep, and I'd find this horrible, dark reason why they wanted to commit suicide. But that horrible, dark reason was put there for a purpose. Now, I do need to actually explain a little bit of the unconscious mind in a different manner. So who's ever heard of the terminology fight or flight? Yep, fight or flight, cool. Now, the interesting thing is that terminology is wrong for 3 reasons. What? My teachers taught me something wrong? Yeah, all the time. Like, if you've gone to formal education, you've probably been taught something wrong. But the terminology is incorrect. It is the order, so it's flight or fight. So we would flee first, and also freeze is put before it. So we have freeze, flight, then fight. Now why? Now, and then the third thing is the order. Like, it has to be in that order. Now why? For what purpose? Not why, what purpose, right? The reasoning is this. I believe very, very, very strongly in a higher power. I won't define that to any of you. Your ideas might be different than mine. I know what I believe, and I know what I hold close to me, and it's the easiest thing for me to relate to. But with that higher power, I also do believe that higher power utilized the laws of nature and helped us evolve in some way. I don't think it's quite defined as Darwinism. There's been more science that came out in the past 150 years than just Darwinism. So there's actually, if you understand science for real, you understand that there's some things that are incorrect with something 150 years ago. But with that, I believe in evolution to a state. And with that, there's a very interesting thing. We evolved not just physically to not be walking on all fours as primates, but to be standing up and same number of arm hair instead of this much and standing up as Homo sapiens sapiens. We didn't just evolve in that way. We evolved psychologically as well. The way we think evolved as well, which means that there were starting points. Now, one of Carl Jung's students, Erich Neumann, he wrote an amazing book. He only wrote 3 books in his entire life. And the one book that Carl Jung actually said that he wishes was the book that he would have written is called The Origins and History of Consciousness. Now, in that book, excuse me again, sorry. Erich Neumann points out that consciousness, self-consciousness, self-awareness did not happen until we became the Homo sapiens sapiens, like we are now. Going forward to 1994, of course I'm going to forget a name right now. Book is called The Red Queen by Matt Ridley. Sorry. Just have to look up into my visual recall to remember that. So Matt Ridley, the Red Queen, he talks about the fact that, and he helped map out the human genome, just so you know. It's a textbook that they utilized in England for years on genetics. He talks about the fact that we evolved psychologically. We had these ideas that we needed in order for us to live. So one of those cool things with this, it's the first time I actually looked at Ken right there. He's manning the camera. It's the first time I looked at his face. So it's beautiful still beautiful. Shiny up top still. He makes it look good. I look horrible with my shaved head, which might be happening within the next week. So we'll find out. But with that, the way that we evolved was for our survival. Everything about us was developed for survival, including negative thoughts, including these things that we present to us as negative that come in very easily, sometimes damaging and hard to our minds. Those were put there for our survival. Now, what the heck? I see a look of confusion, and we'll get to it in a second. Just give me just a teeny bit and we'll get there. How? Why? Well, think of this. We as humans, as Homo sapiens, we have the best visual acuity, the best vision of all mammals. This is because we have this part in our eyeball in the back called the fovea, which gives us focus. So if I'm looking straight at the back at the lady furthest in the back, look at you, I'm seeing you and I'm focusing on you. But in my periphery, I'm seeing these. When I turn over here, I see Kenton's beautiful bald head. And what's your name? I see Darlene's beautiful green shirt. So when I focus here, and so you become the new focus. And she's back there and she's in the periphery. The same thing existed when we had to go in the savannah, when we, the safari, we had to go on these safaris. Like, let's imagine that I'm looking at a tree there in front of me and I see this red fruit. And so dopamine starts kicking up in my brain. Dopamine is actually utilized in order for us to go after a goal. Serotonin, the beautiful chemical serotonin, is given to us when we receive that gift of the goal. And so as I'm looking at here at that red apple on the tree and I'm going forward, let's imagine that the grass is kind of blowing in the wind. But then over to the side, there's a section where it's not blowing. My periphery is trained for me to pay attention to this difference over here so that I can change my focus and pay attention that there might be a lion or a predator over there. So these negative ideas are put there in our minds in order for us to see the negative so that we can pay attention to it so that we can work on it and resolve it. How cool is that idea? Pretty cool? Cool. I want to do one other thing to explain the beauty of our visual acuity and how unique we are as humans, and then jump back into this. So, an interesting thing with the way our brains developed, and I actually have a diagram of this in the book. So, gorillas have heads that are much bigger than ours, yet their brain size is much smaller. This is predominantly due to the mandible muscle being too strong, constricts the size of the brain can't grow. Boom. And there's also some genetic things for on-off switches, but we're not going to get into that stuff. We talk about that later in one of my other trainings. So with that, our brain is developed, 1/3 of it is for visual acuity. 1/3 of our brain is totally dedicated to vision. Now, Andrew Huberman from Stanford, if you guys want to check out a really cool Instagram, check out Huberman Lab. This guy is a neuroscientist. He's also a professor of ophthalmology at Stanford, works in conjunction with Robert Sapolsky. So it's called Huberman Lab, and that's on Instagram. You can learn so much about neuroscience for free if you watch that or follow some of his podcasts. He gets very high level, brings it down low, takes it back up. Super, super smart guy. He basically says this, that our eyeballs are not connected to our brain. He says that our eyeballs are so important They are actually brain that has pushed over evolutionary time out so that we could see the world, so that we can notice it. Now, a cool thing with this is he also points out that with this gives us the ability to think differently than many different animals. So I want you guys to do something. I want you guys to all just kind of close your eyes for a second, if you're willing. If not, that's fine. But I want you all to close your eyes. And I want you to think of somebody who you just love being with. Think about that time that you hung out with them, and it could be a relative. It could be a family friend. It could be, a loved one. Think about that time and think about how good it is. And then I want you to take that and realize that where you're at right now, that's at about a 4. I want you to pump it up a little bit to like a 7 or an 8, to that feeling. I want you to think about that. Cool. Now keep your eyes closed. I want you now to imagine the next time that you're hanging out with that person and you're having an even better time. Vamp it up to about a 7 or 8, maybe even a 9. Vamp it up there. Now, by show of hands, how many, and you guys can open your eyes now, sorry about that. Now, how many of you guys could imagine that time hanging out with your loved one? Right? An interesting concept about this is this helped you to see the future. When we see an impression of what the future can bring to us, it gives us a roadmap to go towards. And so, which we'll come back to. We'll come back to that. Melanie, if I forget, remind me to come back to that, okay? Thank you. Because it's very important for what we were talking about earlier. So with that, we have this visual acuity. We're able to see all this stuff. It's great. Well, we have an impression of what something good, what something future is going to bring for us. So when these people would come to me and I'd talk to them and they'd say, the pain was too much. It was too rough. It was too dark. Life was too much to bear. All of those horrible things. When they would say that thing to me, they were presenting, I like using this. They were presenting something to me. Work that Carl Jung did is he realized that each one of us, when we investigate the shadow of who we are, when we investigate the different person that we are, the reverse mirror image, as he says, and we take that and turn it around, we're seeing it from a different side, okay? So we take it away. So when these people are presenting, and they're saying that they have suicidal thoughts, and if it's you, I'm sorry. I know I've been there myself. It's not that you are a negative person. If you have a loved one who may have passed, it is not because they were a negative person. It's because they only got to the point of noticing that negative. They had not turned the reverse mirror image to see what they wanted. So when these people present and they're saying, I've had, I feel the pain. It's dark. I couldn't stand it. All those things. There's a connotation in that. So there's a difference between content and context. There's a connotation with the context that is different than the content. Let me explain. The water in this bottle is the content. Those are words that are coming out of my mouth. Like if I were to say, I should get a new car. That's saying I want a new car. But if we look at the context, which is the container, the plastic bottle part, it shapes the content of the words. So if I were to say I want a new car, it would be saying that I do not like the car I have, or I think that there is an upgrade to another car. Do you see what I'm saying there? Same thing. The water being, I can't take the pain. That was the content. The context is the reverse mirror image of that. The context is the idea of there is someplace better. So whether they know it or they don't know it, my dear friend, What they are truly searching for is for something better. Deeply embedded in each one of us is the anticipation for some place, something, some lifestyle, some existence, or even the complete elimination of existence for those who don't believe in a next life or anything like that. But that would be better. So if this person has committed suicide, unfortunately, it's not because they were thinking of something bad. It was because there was this unknown search for something better. Wow. Is that cool? That was mind-shattering for me when I learned it, when I realized this. So, what do we do from there? What do we do? Good, great, I know that. What we do, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your loved one, is we find what is that reverse mirror image. What is that root cause turned around to them? What is the opposite of pain? So we go deeper. And unfortunately, I thought I had my erasable markers, but I don't. So I'm going to have to work on this. I knew I was going to use it for one thing, but I didn't know it was going to be this thing. So this will be permanent until I get home with WD-40. But it's basically like this. We start at the starting point here of knowing that that's the pain. That's what they say. So we ask a question, and then we go deeper. We ask another follow-up question and get deeper understanding. So why did you want to commit suicide? To end the pain. Okay, for what purpose? Oh, because I just couldn't take it anymore. Okay, cool. And if you could take it again, if you could have what you wanted, what would that be? I don't know. Well, what are you missing in your life? Connection. Interesting. And how does connection make you feel? It makes me feel whole. Cool. And if you feel whole, what does that give you? It gives me a purpose. Cool. So we just ask different questions. For what purpose? What does that give you? What does that make you feel? What is the highest intention? I mean, this is actually stuff that I teach in a 5-day training that I do on neurolinguistic programming. So you guys are getting like a forward on that. It costs a lot more than this free thing. So, but when we ask those questions, we get to go deep and we find out what they truly want. For a lot of people, I found that it's words like connection, love, acceptance, purpose. So when we spend the time to learn how to do that, how to talk to the person, how to build rapport with that person that doesn't want to talk with us maybe. Or maybe it's somebody who did want to talk with us for a long period of time, but doesn't want to talk with us right now. When we learn these different techniques, when we spend the time, when we put the effort in to stand up and be a warrior, that gives us, and it gives more importantly them, an understanding of themselves. And once we know and we understand what is the problem, we have a greater chance of overcoming it. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, he specifically said that if we have negative emotions tied to an event that is further than 18 months past, we need to gain understanding on it. When we gain understanding on things, it alleviates the mind. Example, how many of you have ever argued with a human? Wow, shocker. I'm glad that Ben didn't raise his hand. I wouldn't argue with this guy either. Love him to death. So thanks for helping back there, Ben. But with that, how many of you then have maybe with some argument a week later, a month later, maybe an hour later, maybe 3 years later, you understand what that person was actually saying. You're like, oh, okay, sure, not a problem. Yeah. Most of us, right? We have that thing. It's because when we find resolution, we can move forward. We do not think of the past for the past. We think of the past to see how we can utilize the future. That's the way our brains are driven. So we find this thing from the past to move us to the forward. Okay? Cool. Now, Where was I? With that, what do we do in the instance where somebody comes to us, or maybe we at ourselves? Because I want to give you guys something valuable to take out of the room right now. I have an online training. I'll tell you guys about it in a minute. There's also the book for sale in there. Be honored if you guys had it. But, also one other thing real quick. If you guys sign up for the email list with Ben back there at the end of the training, I will email you guys an excerpt from the book, chapter 2, which is actually talking about populations that are more likely to commit suicide. That means locations, that means gender preference. It talks about altitude. They found correlations at University of Utah through 2 studies, as well as in Spain, Saudi Arabia, and Peru, that altitude affects it. Utah is actually one of the 5 states in the suicide belt per capita, highest rates. Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico are in those states. The suicide belt, highest per capita, partially due to, and these are 5 of the 6 states that have the highest elevation. The other one that's on that list is Alaska. That's the highest elevation. So high suicide rates in those. Time of year, it talks about all these different things. So get on the email list. It tells you that. It's not Christmas time, actually, that has the highest suicide rate. Right now is actually the highest suicide rate time. Explains it in the notes that I'll say. So sign up for that. But with that, if there is something that you guys can take away with you right now, it's this, is what do we do in the instance when the person can't go any further, when it's a critical time? And this is just a quick thing that I just want to hand out to you guys right now. In my online training, there's over 20 hours worth of information in how to build relationships and stuff like this, but this is an important thing. So 20 plus years ago, I was a young guy, and I had been through a lot of stuff. So I had some trauma from when I was a kid. I served in northeastern Brazil on my Mormon mission, and lived in 4 of the top 17 most dangerous cities of the planet. I saw some stuff that you shouldn't have to see as a human. Things that you don't even see sometimes in movies. So I had some trauma, and I went to a psychologist. And my buddy took me to that psychologist, and it was a dark time. I was contemplating taking my own life. And the psychologist talked with me for 10, 15 minutes because it was half of my buddy Justin's appointment. And he's like, hey, I want to see you next week. Can you promise me to be safe? So making a contract, right? It's a great thing, making a contract with somebody, okay? That wasn't the point I was getting to, but it is a fantastic thing. Hey, can you promise me you'll be safe till tomorrow? Just that verbal contract saves lives. I promise you it does. So he made a verbal contract with me. He's like, hey, can I see you next week? He's like, can you be safe till next week? I was like, I don't think so. So then he was like, okay, well, can you keep yourself safe for another day? No, I can't make that promise. And I started realizing how close I was to this. He said, can you wait another hour? Now it's at this stage where I started shaking. Fight or flight response was kicking in. I was starting to breathe a little heavier, starting to get a little bit worried. I was like, no. He asked me then, can you wait another minute? And at that point is when I started crying, because I couldn't even promise another minute. I remember hyperventilating and like crying and being like, I can't, and like realizing how close I was. And I was like, oh my gosh, this might be it. He said, can you last another breath? Yeah, I can do that. I can last one more breath. I can get one more breath in and one more breath out. Yeah, I can do that. And that's how I lived for 2 weeks. One breath at a time for 2 weeks. I'd wake up and I would constantly have to think, okay, breathe in, Mike, just breathe in. Okay, breathe out, Mike. Okay, breathe out now. Okay, good, you did it. Okay, let's breathe again now. And I was saying that to me until I would fall asleep laying in bed. Okay, just breathe in one more time. Don't do it. Just breathe out. Okay, good, good. 2 weeks. I hadn't been showering. In fact, there was another time where I had 3 friends who all died within a month's time. 3 very dear friends of mine all died within a short amount of time. I was literally laying in the bed next to one of them when he died. Had my hands on the chest of another guy who was a nurse who trained me. And then my best friend went in to put out a fire, and I had to recover his body. And I worked at that place. I was working at that hospital that I was working at the time. None of this happened. It was the hospital where the second guy passed away. And I took some time off. And I told him, I was like, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be away, but I got to be away for a time. So I went home. My daughter would bring me food, water. Wife would sometimes. Mostly the daughter. And after 11 days, I finally got courage to take a shower. Sometimes finding the value is not in the big thing. When we're at the stage where we're simply trying to get to I am enough, it takes a small goal. And then we build on that with another small goal. A day after that, my daughter had me take her to a doctor's appointment. Not a doctor's appointment, sorry, a birthday party down at the Gateway. Well, right across the street from the Gateway in Salt Lake City are 2 homeless shelters. Now there's just one, but there was 2 homeless shelters. And I remember I drove home. This is another key to help if you're suicidal or you know somebody else who's suicidal. And this is also in the book. Is I went home. I was in my Jeep. I grabbed my wife, who it's not been an easy relationship with her, but I do love her very much. And I said, you need to come with me. Why? What are we doing? Just come with me. I don't want to have to explain something. She got in the car, drove to Little Caesars, spent $50, maybe 55 with tax, bought 10 pizzas, went to the homeless shelter, gave them away in less than 30 seconds, drove off. No search for reward, no search for a thank you. When we are in the service of our fellow man, we find meaning. We find purpose. We follow our bliss. We move forward. We have a purpose to life. One more story. It's interesting how these presentations always develop in a new way. Years ago, I was going to go out to Holland with my family. When you're speaking, stress levels a little bit up, atropine levels are up, so you need water. So, family and I, we were going to go out to Holland, hang out in Holland for about 10 days with my dad's town he's from, Amsterdam, fantastic city, got to go there someday. And I was going to take one day off, actually get sleep before I traveled for once in my life. That was thwarted. The hospital called me in. They're like, Mike, we need you to come in. I was like, nope, not today, man. I just worked the past 8 days. I'm not working today. We're day 8 in a row. We're going to Holland tomorrow. I need some rest. I need some chill time. And they're like, Mike, Belknap is doing surgery on this patient. And they've got DIC. If any of you know what that is, it's, I've had 2 DIC patients ever. They both lived, but those are the only 2 that I've ever seen live with DIC. Okay, Hard situation. They're like, we got a patient with DIC. Doctor wants a 2-to-1, so he wanted 2 nurses on that one patient. But we don't even have one. We need you. So, being a little bit codependent sometimes, I'm like, wanting to be the hero. I'm like, sure, I'll go in. So I went in, had hardly any sleep at that point in time. So took a nap in the chair in the patient's room until the patient was getting out of surgery. Woke up 5 minutes before. Patient came in, and she was a mess. This is actually part of the conclusion of the book. She came in, she was a mess. Her pressures were so low, she bled out so much. We did over 36 products, blood unit. We did 36, it was on the dot. 36 blood products within a 12-hour period on this patient. I was doing labs all the time. I didn't go to the bathroom 12 hours at all. Somebody gave me water, and I was running all night long with this patient. And when she first got back, her pressures were so low that I couldn't give her water. I couldn't give her pain meds. I couldn't give her sedation meds. I told her, hey, you've got to get through this. We will get through this together. But your pressures are so low, I can't do this right now. Went through the day, did the day. She lived, boom, out to Holland. Come back 2 weeks later. I'm a hospital supervisor also, so I was walking through the hospital on another floor. And lo and behold, she's walking straight towards me with her 12-year-old son playing ukulele. And and she, I look at her and I smile. I was like, hey. She goes, hi. And I just keep on walking because a lot of times critical patients don't recognize you. And she goes, I know you. And I was like, I know you think you do, but you don't. She goes, no, I know you. She goes, the other nurses told me it was you that saved my life. Thank you for saving my life. Her son would not have had a dad if I had killed myself. You will never know the lives you affect, the lives you can change by standing up and being strong and doing the work. Yeah, I sell the book, I sell the training, and I ask you guys to talk to me outside because we're closing here in just a minute. I want to respect the next trainer's time. So I'm not going to really do a sales presentation, but it's very good price. It's for $199 for over 28 hours worth of material, 56-page workbook, great information. If this is all you get, is this training today, fantastic. If you go on and you do some more trainings with me, that would be great. But I hope that today has been helpful for you guys. More importantly, I hope that it helps somebody else in some way. And much love and stay strong. Thank you. Thank you. We'll meet outside. I want to respect the next speaker's time. I'm also out there. The books are for $20. I sign and initial it. Some of these people have read it. Some of these people have done trainings with me. So hope to see you. Thanks.